Well, good evening and welcome. It's a pleasure to have you once again, and it's good to be back after my brief stay in hiatus after my surgery on my leg. Everything's going very well with that. Hi, I'm Joe Kelleher, Schenectady Online. We're here with you live from the SACC, the Schenectady Access Cable Council Studios on J Street in downtown Schenectady. Hope everybody had a great holiday and enjoyed the Christmas and the New Year's. We wish you all a very prosperous and happy New Year, and it's good to be back. I do want to say a special thank you to the folks at Ortho NY, the great surgeon Sam Dellenbaugh, who took care of me very, very well, and his staff, the surgical center. Everybody was absolutely fantastic, and I am back up and walking with no more hardware in my leg. A little help every now and then, but not too bad. Doing very, very well. And of course, I have to thank my beautiful wife, who has been there all by my side throughout the whole thing, even as bad a patient as I was. Well, I guess I was an okay patient, right? I was okay. Well, she's nodding her head yes, so I'll take that. So really, welcome back once again. It's great to see everybody. A brand new year, and we're going to look at this with some optimism and hope for all the best for our city. It's great to see all of you here, and we want to hear from you. So make sure you check out our Facebook page, Schenectady Online with Joe Kelleher, and you'll see more information there. And we look forward to having you here. If you want to stop by and watch the show, we do it live the Thursday just before each of the city council meetings. So give me a call just so we know that how many more people we're going to have, so we can make the proper arrangements. But it'd be nice to see some people behind the scenes over here and see this all happen live. If you've never seen a TV show go on live, it's really interesting, and I encourage you to see what happens behind the scenes because so much goes into it. The folks here at SACC TV really do a lot of efforts to bring you some great quality programming. Randall Hogue, his son Randy, who's in the control room right now, we applaud him because he does a fantastic job every time we're on the show and every show that he does. It's just phenomenal. A lot to talk about tonight, and I have a special guest tonight, and I'm going to introduce him in just a moment. But what we're going to talk about here tonight are things regarding the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, and the CAPER, which is the report that happens after that to tell how some of those CDBG funds were spent during the course of the year. And it is my pleasure and honor to introduce you to a gentleman who has been an integral part of the city here for quite a number of years. And you see him up at the city council meetings speaking on behalf of the people, and you see him speaking on several other occasions as well on multiple programs, and you'll see him up at the pulpit every once in a while too. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Reverend Phil Grigsby from SICM, the Schenectady Intercity
Ministry.
Intercity Ministries, right. Pleasure to see you.
Well, thank you.
Thanks so much for being on the show. We appreciate it.
Thanks for the invitation.
Great to have you. Christmas was okay?
Very good, thank you.
And
Very good.
Jan is your wife, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah,
Good.
Doing well, thank you.
Excellent. So glad to hear. So a lot happening here with the new information that's come through on the Community Development Block Grant. And I know that you've spoken on several times at the Rail about some of the things about where some of the funding should go, and seeing on where some of the funding has gone. And I'd like to get your take on some of the recent activities and some of your feelings on what's been happening with CDBG funding.
Well, I think we should talk about the context a little bit.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And that it's really something that has not happened yet, but it's an occasion for citizens to weigh in on their views in terms of how they believe such funding should be spent. And these are important issues, but also people have different opinions, so we understand that. I mean, I've spoken on various occasions on various aspects of it, and I should just say at the beginning that SICM, the Schenectady Intercity Ministry, we do receive a small amount of funds through the CDBG. It helps us with our summer lunch program. But I'm not really here to talk about that particular aspect of it because it's a broader picture, and I think there's, with the mayor and now with a relatively new director of development, but also it's an occasion to look at how do these funds get spent in our community. They're funds that come from the federal government. They come in three different parts. It's all, not to belabor the acronyms a lot, but they are important to know. The Consolidated Plan is the overall name of it.
Right.
And then in the consolidated plan are, as I say, three aspects. One, Emergency Solutions Grant, which is focused on the homeless and is a relatively small part of the grant. It supports groups like Bethesda House and Safe House and those who are working on homelessness in our community.
Okay.
Usually there's not a lot of comment about that because it's a relatively small amount and it's very focused in that area. The second area is home, which is around housing concerns. Home is the most restricted because it's focused on housing. You can use it for certain types of rehab and other kinds of things. It's often spent by groups like Better Neighborhoods, the Land Trust, Habitat, and the city uses some of those funds. Home funds have been growing over time, but as anyone will tell you, there's more limitations on how they can be spent. That's just how it is.
Right.
So most people really spend a lot of time, more time talking about what the acronym we use, CDBG, Community Development Block Grant, because it's the most flexible source of money that the city can use for a variety of purposes. CDBG is meant to primarily benefit low and moderate income people.
Okay.
And that's the criteria that gets spent. Once you get past that criteria, it can be spent a variety of ways. And people often think about, oh, it's a grant for this agency or that agency.
Mm.
That's actually a relatively small part of the money, although it's a part that people feel very passionately about every year, and so it does get the headlines. What you referred to earlier, in the way that people know about what's get done, is something called a CAPER.
Yes.
Again, not to belabor acronyms, but that is the annual report the city puts out, and that's already been put out for last year. It was put out in the fall, and it's a publicly available document. It's actually a pretty straightforward document to take a look at. It's about 20 pages long, but it's a narrative kind of thing. That just says, yeah, we made these goals in this area. No, we didn't make these goals in this area. It's a way that citizens, there's a copy at City Hall, there's a copy, used to be at the library, probably still. Right. People can access that document. The city has been good about putting that document on their website each year, and then people can, not the whole document, but the key, the narrative part, to see what it means. The critical time now, though, is because this money comes from HUD, Housing and Development, at a federal level, and that what the critical time now is the time where HUD requires a 5-year plan.
Okay.
It's a 5-year plan to say, how do we as a community, and it's through city government, how do these funds get spent? And for over the 5-year period, what's the framework? What's the goal? And then each year, the mayor recommends, the council approves, people apply for funding, and then they decide how the funds actually get spent. And it's around $3 million a year that comes into the city for that.
So with those funds, since it comes from the federal government, are there certain restrictions that are put on those funds that what they can and can't be used for?
There are some very broad criteria.
Okay.
As I say, the main criteria is to primarily benefit low and moderate income people.
Right.
And how you interpret that is quite varied, and there are a lot of regulations that relate to that. But so it allows for a broad array of activities to be done, and as long as you can't spend on something that benefits upper income people in a certain area and only them, for example. But beyond that, it has a broad range of activities, and the city spends it for public service, for code enforcement, for street paving. There's a certain amount that can be used for administration. I think most of the controversy discussion comes around public service activities because that's meant we want to support the Arts Center, we want to support whatever, how that goes.
So it's, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because in taking a look at some of last year's funds, and I have a little brief on last year's information and how some of that money was spent, like $164,000 on community policing for the Schenectady Police Department, and code enforcement, as you mentioned, was $630,000 went to that, which is pretty much the entire department's budget there.
It is, and that's where it's a very interesting policy discussion, because the reason, a number of years ago, the federal government used to have something called revenue sharing, and revenue sharing then got ended, and so the only funds that come to a locality like the city of Schenectady. And these kind of funds, people should be aware, come to cities 50,000 and over. And so if you in a smaller city, there's a state pool of funds like this, but Schenectady is called an entitlement community because we get 50,000 people or over. That's where it's been interesting in Troy, for example, because Troy just went under that number.
Oh.
And so they've been trying to figure out where are those 200 people so we can be over. Because you have to have a line somewhere,
Right.
for this kind of stuff, and so the line happens to be 50,000. And so it becomes an entitlement community.
I see.
And given the tax structure we have and everything else, and given the demands of a shifting population, there, as you might imagine, are lots of pressures on that budget, and
Sure.
lots of competing interests to say it should go here, it should go there, it should go wherever. That funding for police is in there because residents have always identified the need of public safety
Absolutely.
as a very high priority. Now, where does the money come out of? Does it come out of general tax revenue? Does it, when the city builds its budget process, the city has to decide, and that means we, the people, can give input. Should it come out of funds from here? Should it come out from state aid? Should it come from property tax? That's always the continuing discussion, how that goes. Code enforcement has always been very hard.
Oh, absolutely.
We have an old city. We have a lot of old buildings. What do you do? I think the mayor has helpfully done a strong housing priority to say something must be done about this, and has found some ways to demolish property within a short period of time that otherwise should not stand up. Code enforcement is expensive. It's the same policy question. Does it come out of these funds? Does it come out of property tax funds? Does it come out of state aid? That's where we, the people, have to weigh in and say, look, how do we want to prioritize these funds, and what do we want to do? They're interesting policy discussions, sometimes very emotional, but it's important that just people get the information and make their voices known.
And and I'm looking through some of the nonprofits in here and how some of those got bent. And at SICM, the Schenectady Inner City Ministries, got only 5,000, which was probably the lowest amount that was given out that year.
Well, it's only so much in the pie.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
How it goes. For us, it's for a summer lunch program. It helps provide help in the community. It leverages other money, so it's important.
Now, I know some of the volunteers that helped out at the school lunch program, and you see a very interesting dynamic, and it's very very needed in the community over here.
Well, we do summer lunch because kids get lunch in school during the year.
Right.
And thanks to our superintendent, who opted as soon as he could for what's called the community eligibility provision that enables all kids in the schools to get free breakfast and lunch.
Oh.
And the effect of that has been to really increase attendance. The community used to spend a lot of money in the past, I was just talking to somebody about this, on dealing with truancy. And you still have to worry about that, but there's far less of it because kids come to school for breakfast and lunch.
Isn't that something?
And we can thank the superintendent for opting for that. It's a federal program that's now allowed. It hasn't been around that long, and so unfortunately, 82% of the kids in the public schools qualify for free reduced price lunch.
Really?
82%.
82%.
Yeah. So and people try to duck that number, and they say, well, don't talk about that. My own point of view is, let's recognize that, and what do we do about it?
That's right.
We have a changing population, we have a changing demographic, we have losses of opportunities and jobs. What do we do? Let's recognize that and work on it. And the superintendent has recognized that.
Well, and this is something that Dr. Spring talked about several years ago, and they spoke at a lot of the community, the neighborhood association meetings,
right.
and about making sure to write the state, the governor, about the schools all getting the proper funding. And this year we're seeing all the commercials on TV about the big push to make sure that the governor stands behind his word to making sure that all children get their fair share. And to do that, we need to get the funding because we're getting only, 53% of what we should be getting. Is that correct? Right?
I don't know the number offhand, but certainly when I've heard his presentations, heard others. It is a complex issue, but it seems pretty clear that the state needs to do more for public education, especially in districts like
absolutely.
this that have majority minority, if there's a term being used. But this is a district of high poverty and high need, and therefore should have additional support for it. But he does that during the school year, and then we deal with the summertime because, as I sometimes quip to people, some people think somehow that let's just lock the kids away and bring them out in the fall. It's like, I know that's a silly stereotype, but basically, we've had our highest demand in our pantry in the summer because kids are home from school. And so summer lunch helps to offset that and more we can support that. But, just back to this, that's one among many. And I think people need to look for, there's going to be some hearings, some input sessions on a 5-year plan. And it'll probably be looking at what should we be doing with family and youth, housing, infrastructure, jobs in our community. CDBG provides some way to address that. It's certainly not enough money, but it's something that where we the people can weigh in and see what it does. And then even when the 5-year plan is set, then to look every year to speak out. And don't be deterred by any, it's a little complicated, but not terribly so. And I think that the plan, the caper is straightforward that people can look at. And various legislators, I think, want to provide information about it, and but it's something that goes from here on, so that there'll be notices probably at the end of this month or starting in February, and then the whole thing is wrapped up by the summertime. So it's a time that people can look. It's how we the people spend our money.
Sure. And I'm so glad that you touched on this kind of stuff because a lot of people truly don't understand a lot about it, and I noticed something in here that I had touched base on last year for engineering, where they used $426,000 to pave a half-mile of road.
Well, I think that was what in the proposal. I think they actually did more than a half mile. In fairness to everybody, they did more than a half mile.
Yeah, and I saw that on Albany Street alone.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
They repaved Albany Street. It was repaving on Central Parkway. So there were several, and I said, $425,000, and I made phone calls to other municipalities, and said, how much does it charge to pave a half mile of road? And it was, in worst case scenario, it was 25% of this, and it was interesting to see. And when I spoke up at the rail regarding this, it was Lisa Perazzo that said they took half of that and put it into a recreational fund.
Oh, okay.
So that was interesting to see, but then you saw much more than that.
Right.
So it's interesting to be interesting to delve into a little bit more and see actually how that money was spent. And I'm glad to know that people like myself or any of our viewers here or listeners online can go up to take a look at that caper and find out that information.
Well, and I think, again, you don't have to have a PhD in it. So it's a matter of just looking at it. And it's even people speaking out and saying, well, look, even just in general, this seems too high, this seems too low, or we really should do much more about youth recreation. Just to voice the concern. And I'm not saying it's one out among many, but I think it's people should express their felt concerns and then say what can be done about it. Paving gets a little complicated because in the prior days, years ago, the good news I've been around a while, the bad news is I've been around a while. But, back in the day when they did my street, they did the curbs.
Right.
And they did it in granite. That's great if you can afford that.
Oh, yeah, very expensive.
It certainly adds the cost to it. It's much more durable. And engineers will argue back and forth as to what level you should do.
Right.
That's where it gets into discussions where you just try to have it as dispassionate as possible. Say, where can we get the most bang for the buck? What do we as a city want? What do we believe we can afford? That's where the policy discussions become interesting, sometimes emotional, but that's where people need to just become informed as they can.
Yes. Yep.
As long as they're not taking it personally or taking it personally on somebody, say, this is what I believe, this is what's important to me, my neighborhood, my community, speak out, make your voices known. Mm-hmm. And that's always been the good thing about the council, and it's interesting you time this for the council, because they've always been welcoming to have people speak and express their concerns. You got 3 minutes. And,
yes. Yep.
And as long as it's not personalized,
right.
I think they've been very welcoming to say this is my concern. This is what I want to see. Mm-hmm. Now, CDBG and the consolidated plan will have its own special hearing, and that'll come up probably sometime in April.
Yes. Yep.
To speak
and that's
out.
what I was going to talk about.
And
here a little bit.
That's the good thing about it is they have over the last couple of years put that during a council session.
Yes.
So it's on a regular night. It gets publicized, and it's also televised. So that's how the information gets out there. Sometimes, some years they've had different times, but this council has been willing to have that on a regular Monday night, and they welcome the input.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that parlays into something that I've been speaking about repeatedly on the show, is about the people having an opportunity to go up to the rail and speak on these and other issues regarding where their tax money is going and such, and where they'd like to see the funding spent, where they'd like to see the focus of city business. And I have to say that you and I have both been up at the rail on numerous occasions, and we, for the most part, I would have to say, I beg your pardon, that most people are very respectful when they get up there. There are some people that get a little heated, and in some cases it's understandable, but this is one opportunity for people to really start speaking and saying where they'd like to see their tax money go, because the government doesn't just create this money to hand it out. It comes from somewhere, and it comes from those of us who are working and paying the taxes, and then it trickles back down to us in these type of grants. As Reverend Grigsby, had mentioned, it's the consolidated plan, and it consists of 3 different pieces: the CDBG, Community Development Block Grant for housing, suitable living environment, economic opportunities, the home program for property acquisition, new housing construction, rehabilitation, and such, and ESG, which is the assistance program for the homeless, which is something I want to touch on here in just a few moments. But we have only a few minutes left in the show, so what is, if you were going to talk to somebody who wasn't really familiar with it and tell them what they could do, or give them some advice about what they might be able to do to influence or help out with this or find out more about it, why don't you take a look into the camera over there and tell them what they need to know, or how they can contact you if they have questions of you about
Well, they
city
can certainly
ministries.
contact me in the Schenectady City Ministry, but the city has done a good job of publicizing this, and I know they want to publicize this further. There is going to be there are going to be gatherings to get community needs input on the 5-year plan. So show up at that, speak your mind, say what's of interest to you, what you believe the priorities should be. And then when the mayor puts out, and you'll find this does get in the Gazette, it's a full-page thing that says this is what the mayor's recommendations are. Look at that. And come speak out at the time to say this is what I think should be done, or I don't think should be done. Just speak your mind. It's really we the people that can make the difference. If you're not comfortable in a public setting, at least all legislators I know, their numbers are out there. Give them a call.
Yep. Numbers, emails. Yep.
Their emails are out there. Write an email. They welcome input, again, as long as it's not personal. It's not a personal thing, but just say, I think this is great, it's going here, or it shouldn't go there. You can say the priorities are right, the priorities are wrong. It's we the people. And all legislators I know are willing to take that kind of input. They welcome it, and it's we the people that decide how this goes. It is a challenging fiscal environment, so it's hard to make wholesale changes, no question. Yeah. But I think if somebody says, yeah, I think this should happen, or I'd like to see a pilot sidewalk program, or I think more should be done for youth in this area, or something like that. Both the mayor and legislators I know are responsive to that. It's up to we the people to become informed and then to be part of the process. And the good news about this process, if you don't get 1 year, it is an ongoing process. So This is, as long as Congress doesn't change the framework of this program, which who knows, could be interesting.
Yeah, with the new
but
Congress,
it's been an ongoing annual process, and you become more informed about it, you become more comfortable about it, and then you just you can make some change over time.
So thank you very much, and if you can stick around another couple minutes here, I've got some
Sure.
other programs coming up. Oh, speaking of which, are there any events or programs coming up for Sikkim that you can plug for us here on the show?
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
The first Sunday of May, we sponsor the Crop Walk.
Good.
And the Crop Walk starts from downtown Emmanuel Freedom's Church. It's a walk to raise money and awareness to fight hunger both here and overseas. And people can sign up for that through our website or
Great.
otherwise that. And that's, www.sicm.us.
.us.
So we're
Okay.
.us. .org and .net were taken. That's why. if you look at those, that's somebody else. That's not us. But it's .us, and we have a Facebook page.
Right.
Folks who like to do Twitter, we do that too. We also
Good.
have Instagram, all that good stuff. And
You're all
so-
connected there, aren't
So
you?
you can follow us. And we have, how do you communicate these days? It's more than
That's-
more than the Gazette.
Oh,
you know?
yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
although we try to be in there as well. So the Crop Walk's coming up for Sunday in May. We certainly welcome people to take part in whatever. In April, we have a couple work days. We help to clean out some of the parks.
Great.
In April, I think April 18th, if my math is right, the calendar, that's a Saturday. There'll be a work day. They'll be on the website too and Facebook. So glad to have people take part where we
Good.
give back and organize some people. It's parks we do summer lunch in, but the city has 26 parks. So
Yeah.
how do you work on those? So I think
Exactly. Yeah. We
it
can
has to
pick
be a
and choose.
public-private partnership to try to make that happen. And,
Right.
and we also get involved in cleaning up some of the parks that, I could even test your knowledge. You know where Wallingford Park is.
I can't say off the top of my
And
head
who
that
was
I know where that
Wallingford,
is.
right? That's even better. He was a city council member in the 50s that they named a park after. It's in Mount Pleasant. It's in 5th and Congress. But,
Okay.
there are a number of areas that we help to clean up because, it's important to the neighborhoods. And we do it in conjunction with the Mount Pleasant Association and some others. So not just there, but Wallingford I happen to know pretty well because I've been there
Nice.
often.
Okay.
And I know the mayor's, it's other kind of pocket parks we kind of work at to try to clean up because city government is very challenged. And so how can we do a public-private partnership and make that work?
And it's important that the public let people know about those kind of
Mhm,
things and get the knowledge out there. Talk to
Right.
their, one of the things that I had mentioned to people and mentioned on a regular basis is make sure that they talk to their neighborhood association presidents.
Right.
Because they have a key where they get together with the son or they can connect in with the mayor's office or the city council and let ideas of projects and opportunities for these types of funds to be spent in our community to betterment of Schenectady as a whole.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the opportunity. And
Oh, absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. And
Yeah.
we've spoken on a couple of occasions here and there, and I've been wanting to have you on the show, and I thought this was a great opportunity.
I appreciate it.
When is the March for Jesus this year? So somebody had asked me about that. Do you have
Good
that?
question. Don't know offhand.
Okay. Well,
That's a summer event usually.
it is. Yeah,
Yeah,
usually
yeah.
around the end of July, beginning of August.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a summertime event.
Okay.
So certainly be glad to get that to you as that's known.
That'd be great.
Yeah, yeah.
That would be great. I know I know several people who get involved in that every year, and it's always a great opportunity
Yeah.
to meet and greet and bring the community together.
Yeah,
So-
all these kind of events are very good community building events as well as the message. So,
Oh, absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. So one of the other things that is coming up, and I had mentioned this earlier when we talked about the homeless, there are two words that should never be used in the same sentence, folks, and those are homeless veteran.
Oh, right.
And there's an event coming up over at my American Legion post. It's at 1809 Union Street, American Legion, Niskayuna Post 1092.
Okay.
And that's going to be the freeze out. Have you heard about the freeze out?
Not exactly, no.
What that is, it was started by the She VFW Post, She Palmer, down in Albany. And what they do with that is they have a freeze out. People gather together. They camp out overnight and use that opportunity to collect clothing, collect supplies for our homeless veterans, and bring awareness to that. And then in the morning, people gather together and we'll have breakfast, but to really bring awareness to this whole event and camp out overnight. We're doing some great things over there. We'll have food over at our event. We'll have some folks camping out. My good friend Tom Ferry and his wife Kelly, they're bringing their 5-ton military vehicle that they're going to bring up over there. Albany Ladder is donating a mini escalator to help people get up inside who can't climb up on the back.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a phenomenal event. So please stop by there. That's going to be on Saturday, January 31st rather, Saturday the 31st. Over at the American Legion Post on Upper Union Street.
Very good.
So if people have an opportunity to stop by, want to donate clothing, remember there are both men and women veterans who are homeless. So we could really use the clothes for either one of them. And otherwise, please keep yourself informed. Check out the Caper online at the city's website. And find out more information.
You Google City of Schenectady and it pops up.
Pops right up there, yeah.
And it's actually cityofschenectady.com, I think.
Yes, it is. Yep, you're absolutely right. Cityofschenectady.com. And it's the Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Review, which tells how that CDBG, or rather the Consolidated Plan money was spent and what it went toward, and how you can now, when the City Council comes up, you can even start speaking as of now on how you'd like to see that money come about in the future and where you'd like to see that get spent, because those are our tax dollars, folks. This is where your money and where you want to see your city legislators utilize those funds and send it out. So that's all we have time for today. I appreciate you stopping by, and thanks once again. It's always a pleasure to have you here, and make sure you check us out online on our Facebook page, Schenectady Online with Joe Kelleher. I'd like to thank my very special guest today, the Reverend Phil Grigsby from Schenectady Intercity Ministries. Always a pleasure to talk with you. Always great information, and thank you for all that you do for the city of Schenectady.
Okay. Well, thank you for the
pleasure
invitation.
to have you once again.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Great to see you again, and make sure you tell your friends about us, too. Check us out online anytime at sac.tv. That's SACC.tv. Good night.